The ocean breathes, endless and eternal, a rhythm older than the rise of mountains. Waves break above, gentle and bright, but beneath lies a silence vast and unbroken. There, in the realm where light fades, shadows drift and secrets wait in the stillness. It is a kingdom unseen, older than myths, deeper than memory, bound by mystery alone. Mortals know the sea as surface, glittering blue and restless tide, but not its heart. For in the abyss, the sea keeps its truest voice, a song too ancient for men to hear. Yet one God listens, always listening, his spirit tied to water, storm and tide. Poseidon, lord of oceans, guardian of depths, feels the murmur rise through the waves. The call is quiet but unyielding, carried by currents from places no sun has touched. It speaks of a throne, hidden and waiting, carved not by hands, but by the ocean itself. A seat of silence, of memory, of power that is not conquest, but communion. The Abyssal Throne, veiled in myth, waits in the dark where even gods tread softly. This is not a tale of war, nor of ruin, but of discovery, reverence, and eternal sea. The sea was calm, but in its calmness lay a whisper, soft and ancient, riding on the wave. No mortal ear could hear it, yet the ocean spoke in voices older than mountains and stars. The whisper was not of storm or rage, but of something hidden, a call from the unseen deep. Poseidon stirred, for even a god cannot ignore the murmur of his own domain when it speaks. He stood at the edge of the sea, his trident beside him, feeling the currents pull like threads. Each wave that broke upon the shore carried a secret, urging him to listen more closely. The god's gaze stretched across the horizon, but the voice came not from the open waters. It came from beneath, far beneath, from a place where even his sight had never fully reached. The ocean's floor shifted in silence, echoing words not spoken, but felt in the bones of the sea. It was a summons, gentle but steady, a message woven into the very rhythm of the tides. Poseidon closed his eyes, listening, and the sound grew clearer, a song too vast to ignore. It spoke of memory, of a place untouched by time, where silence itself carried a name. The abyss, dark and endless, was not empty as mortals once feared, but alive with mystery. From the depths rose a voice without form, a breath of the first waters that shaped the earth. It was neither warning nor promise, but something in between, a truth waiting to be seen. Poseidon's heart, bound forever to the sea, felt the pull as if it were destiny itself. He knew the ocean never called without reason, and the call was not one to be denied. The whisper was not chaos, not tempest, but a steady tide, constant and undeniable. It was the voice of the deep itself, not of creature or god, but of the ocean's own soul. The lord of the sea bent low, dipping his hand into the water, letting currents speak. They curled around his fingers, cool and alive, carrying fragments of meaning he could sense. The currents painted images, not with words, but with feeling, vast and deep as eternity. He saw shadows of coral spires, unseen gates, and a throne glowing faintly in the abyss. It was not a throne of conquest, but of stillness, carved from memory and silence itself. The ocean asked not for rule, but for reverence, not for command, but for listening. Poseidon rose, water dripping from his hand, his mind filled with a song of the deep. Amphitrate's warning echoed faintly in his heart. Yet the call was stronger than caution. He knew the journey would take him far below, where no sun had ever touched the sea. There was no fear in him, only wonder. For the ocean was both his home and his soul. The whisper grew into a pulse, steady as a heartbeat. guiding him toward the abyss. Each moment, each wave, pressed upon him with quiet insistence, urging him to follow. And so the god of the sea prepared, not for battle, not for storm, but for discovery. The ocean had called, and its master would answer, bound by love, duty, and eternal tide. The first step had begun, with a whisper that became a summons, carrying him below. The depths awaited, and with them the truth of the Abyssal Throne, silent yet eternal. The ocean is alive, its rhythm steady, its presence vast, every wave a note in a boundless symphony. Above, the waters sparkle in sunlight, but below, a deeper pulse beats, hidden from mortal sight. Poseidon feels it beneath his feet. Through every tide and current, the ocean's true heart stirring. It is not the rage of storms or the crash of waves, but something quieter, something eternal. The sea itself breathes, a pulse that binds rivers, clouds, and rain into a single endless cycle. Every droplet that falls, every tide that shifts, joins the song of water, carrying whispers of time. Poseidon listens, his spirit bound to this rhythm, for it is his crown, his temple, his soul. The pulse deepens, slow and steady, echoing not in sound, but in the marrow of the sea. Mortals may see only waves and foam, but beneath lies memory, flowing silent through the abyss. The ocean remembers everything, every ship that sailed, every storm, every prayer cast to its depths. It remembers the first dawn, when land rose from water and the sea shaped the earth's face. Poseidon closes his eyes and feels it all, the story of creation, alive in every current. The ocean is no servant, no wild beast, but a voice, eternal, patient, and impossibly vast. Its pulse is not command, but connection, binding God and sea in a bond that cannot break. The call grows stronger, as if the very tides lean toward him, urging him to understand. Poseidon lifts his trident, not as a weapon, but as a vessel to channel the ocean's will. The metal hums softly, resonating with the deep, carrying the steady heartbeat of the waters. He knows this rhythm is no illusion, no trick, but the truth of the abyss, calling him onward. The sea does not lie. It speaks in currents, in silence, in the weight of its endless flow. Each wave against the shore is a drumbeat, echoing the same truth. The deep has something to show. He senses it rising, not in fury, but in quiet urgency. A message from the oldest waters. The ocean's pulse becomes a guide, pulling him toward the unknown with a steady hand. He follows without fear, for he is the ocean's own, and its call is as natural as breath. The heartbeat grows louder the deeper he listens, each thrum like a door opening in the dark. He feels the unity of all waters, surface to trench, river to sea, storm to calm. The ocean's pulse is life itself, endless, flowing, returning always to its source. Poseidon breathes with it, his chest rising and falling in time with the endless rhythm. The god of the sea is no master here, no ruler, but a listener before the vastness. The pulse does not command, it invites, offering wisdom carried in silence and tide. He understands now. The ocean is not asking for power, but for presence, for listening. The abyss is not empty, not void, but full of memory, waiting to share its truth. The pulse leads him downward, toward places unseen, where the throne of silence waits. It is a summons not of force, but of belonging, reminding him he is part of the ocean. Poseidon bows his head, letting the tide wash over him, his heart steady with the seas. The ocean's pulse continues, patient and eternal, guiding him deeper into its mystery. Amphitrite sat upon a bed of coral, her gaze calm yet distant, as the ocean hummed around her throne. Her presence was like the tide itself, soft in appearance, but carrying a strength hidden beneath the calm. She knew the sea's voice well, for she too was woven into its rhythm, bound by love and by duty. When Poseidon approached, she lifted her eyes, already knowing the weight he carried in his silence. The currents told her the deep had spoken, and its summons was not a whisper easily ignored. "Beloved," she said gently, her voice a ripple on still waters, "I see the abyss has called your name." Poseidon inclined his head, his trident gleaming faintly, echoing the pulse of the endless deep. "The sea speaks of a throne," he answered, "a seat hidden where even gods hesitate to tread." Amphitrite's smile was soft, but her eyes shimmered with an old, unspoken knowledge. "There are places in the ocean," she said, "that remember more than even you, my lord, can bear." Her words hung like pearls in the silence, beautiful, fragile, yet weighted with quiet truth. She spoke not in fear, but in reverence. For the abyss was not danger, but mystery made eternal. Poseidon listened, his heart steady but his spirit restless. For the call still beat within him. He felt the deep drawing him nearer, a promise of revelation he could not turn away from. "Should I resist it?" he asked, though he already knew resistance was as futile as stopping a tide. Amphitrite shook her head slowly, her hair flowing like seaweed in a gentle current. "The sea does not ask what it cannot give," she whispered, "but it will ask that you listen. Listening is not always easy, even for a god who commands storms and bends rivers to his will." Her tone was not scolding, but tender, a reminder that even kings of oceans are bound to its heart. Poseidon reached for her hand, their fingers entwining, a bond as strong as the pull of tides. "I will listen," he promised, though he knew the path would not be simple, nor without its weight. Amphitrite looked upon him with both love and caution, as one who knows the depth of silence. "The throne you seek," she said, "is not of gold or conquest, but of patience and memory. It is a seat carved not for glory, but for burden, a covenant between you and the abyss itself." Poseidon bowed his head slightly, acknowledging what her wisdom had always offered him. The sea was not his to rule alone. It was his to protect, to honor, to serve as much as rain. Amphitrite touched his face, her palm cool, her voice no louder than a secret tide. "If you go, remember this. The ocean does not belong to you, nor you to it, but you are one." Her words sank into him like stones in still water, rippling through his soul without end. The silence between them was not heavy, but profound, filled with trust, love, and ancient knowing. Poseidon straightened, the decision already made, his heart tethered to the call of the abyss. He would descend, not to conquer, but to learn, to sit where silence itself had carved a throne. Amphitrite did not try to hold him back, for she knew no one can silence the voice of the deep. Instead, she gifted him a blessing, a touch of calm that would steady him against the unknown. "Return to me," she said softly, "not as ruler, but as one who has heard what lies beneath." Poseidon nodded, his eyes filled with a reflection of endless water, steady as the horizon. Together they stood, two guardians of the ocean, their bond unbroken even by the abyss. And so, with Amphitrite's counsel echoing in his heart, Poseidon turned toward the depths. The sea awaited him, its whispers stronger, its song clearer, as the journey drew him nearer. What lay below would not be battle or triumph, but truth spoken by the oldest voice of all. Poseidon stood at the shore where the sky met the sea, his gaze steady on the endless horizon before him. The waves lapped gently, yet beneath their calmness, he felt the pull. Steady, insistent, impossible to deny. He raised his trident high, and the waters stirred, recognizing their master, parting in reverence and silence. With a step forward, he entered the sea, letting it embrace him as a child returns to its mother's arms. The salt wrapped around him, cool and endless, carrying him toward the depths with a whispering song. As he descended, sunlight fractured above him, breaking into golden shards scattered across the blue expanse. Soon the surface faded and the colors shifted, the world dimming into shades of silver and green. Schools of fish darted around him, shimmering like stars scattered across a sky turned upside down. Each creature moved with purpose, a chorus of motion, as though guiding him toward the path ahead. Deeper still he swam, his form cutting through waters untouched by mortals, guided only by the pulse. The twilight zone greeted him, where light weakens and the sea becomes a cathedral of shadow and glow. Strange forms moved here, creatures with lanterns in their bodies, eyes that shimmered like hidden gems. Their glow was soft, not threatening, but reverent, as if they too recognized the god passing through. The water thickened, colder, heavier, each fathom pressing down with the weight of eternal silence. Yet Poseidon moved with ease, each motion of his arm a command, each breath steady and sure. He felt the current carry him, as though the sea itself had become his chariot to the abyss. The deeper he went, the more the ocean revealed wonders unseen by mortal eyes or sailors' tales. Forests of coral stretched in colors muted by shadow, yet vibrant with life of their own. Creatures with wings of glass drifted past, transparent as dreams, their movements slow and graceful. Even in darkness, the sea shone with hidden beauty, a reminder that silence is never empty. Poseidon's eyes grew accustomed to the dim light, seeing not void but a kingdom vast and alive. He paused, listening to the silence, and within it, he heard the ocean's heartbeat grow stronger still. It pulsed around him, guiding, encouraging, whispering that the journey had only just begun. He remembered Amphitrite's words, that the throne was not conquest, but covenant, not command, but listening. Her wisdom followed him like a lantern in the dark, steady and unyielding, lighting his resolve. The sea pressed closer, wrapping him in its immensity, yet he felt no fear, only reverence. For he was part of it, as much as the tide, as much as the storm and calm. Deeper he went, past the reach of sun, where no mortal eye could see or dream. The world around him shimmered faintly, alive with movement, whispers, and light from the unseen. He passed through curtains of jellyfish, their bodies glowing softly like constellations in a darkened sky. Each step, each breath, carried him further from the surface, closer to the heart of the sea. The trident hummed faintly, echoing the pulse, resonating with the same rhythm of the abyss. It was not a weapon here, but a compass, pointing him toward the path the ocean demanded. He let it guide him, trusting the bond, trusting the sea that had called him since birth. The water grew colder, but not cruel. A chill that spoke of age, of memory, of time. He knew the abyss was near, for the silence deepened, and the currents pressed him with urgency. No longer was he surrounded by creatures, but by stillness, waiting, patient, ancient, beyond all reckoning. Poseidon felt it. He was close, the threshold of a realm where mystery took its true form. He breathed, steady and calm, his heart in rhythm with the sea as the descent continued on. The journey had begun in whispers, but now it was song, guiding him deeper, toward the abyss. The silence deepened as Poseidon entered the realm where the sea kept its oldest secrets hidden from time. No light from above reached here, only the faint glow of creatures born in eternal night and patience. The abyss stretched wide, an endless plain of shadow where stillness was both presence and guardian. The trident in his hand thrummed gently, sensing the nearness of what lay waiting in the dark. Each pulse felt like a heartbeat, aligning with his own, guiding him toward something ancient and vast. He moved forward slowly, each motion deliberate, as if the ocean itself had slowed time around him. The sand below shimmered faintly, silver grains reflecting the pale light of unseen currents drifting. Structures began to rise from the seabed, pillars shaped not by hands, but by nature's long patience. They looked like ruins, yet carried no sign of decay, only timeless strength carved by the abyss. As he drew closer, he saw arches of coral twisted into forms resembling gates and silent sentinels. The seabed grew uneven, forming terraces that resembled steps descending toward a hidden destination. He followed the path, feeling watched, not by eyes, but by the ocean itself, observing his intent. His thoughts returned to Amphitrite's warning. Power without listening becomes weight heavier than stone. He whispered to the waters, not with words, but with presence, offering respect for what lay beyond. The current stirred, a slow acknowledgement, wrapping around him like a soft tide of approval. He pressed onward, passing through forests of black coral, glowing faintly with threads of blue light. Creatures emerged from their shelters, giant crabs, serpentine fish, and drifting forms with wings like veils. They did not flee or threaten, but simply lingered, silent witnesses to his solemn passage. The deeper he ventured, the more the trident grew warm, resonating with something ahead, unseen yet calling. He soon reached a cavern, vast and open, with walls rising like cliffs of obsidian and pearl. The entrance was framed by pillars of stone, draped with kelp that swayed though no current stirred. Inside, the cavern glowed faintly, lit by luminous moss that clung to the rocks like stars. Poseidon entered, and the silence deepened, pressing on him. Yet it carried no malice, only reverence. At the cavern's heart lay a dais, carved from a single block of stone older than memory. Upon it rested no throne yet, only an empty space, waiting as though it knew he would come. The abyss did not give easily. It invited, it tested, it listened before granting passage. Poseidon approached slowly, every step a vow, every breath an acknowledgement of the ocean's authority. The trident pulsed stronger, brighter now, its light filling the cavern in waves of silver glow. It illuminated carvings on the walls, spirals, waves, and symbols that told stories older than gods. He traced them with his eyes, feeling their meaning not in mind, but in the depth of soul. They spoke of balance, of guardianship, of the endless cycle of tides, storms, and calm. It was clear. The throne was not meant to rule, but to serve, to harmonize with the sea. Poseidon understood then that this journey was not conquest, but surrender to something greater. He placed the trident gently into the dais, and it resonated with a deep, echoing hum. The cavern shook lightly, not in violence, but as if the sea itself exhaled in recognition. From the stone rose a form, not carved, not forced, but shaped by the abyss itself. A throne of coral, pearl, and shadow took shape, glowing faintly with inner light, alive yet still. It pulsed as though it carried the heartbeat of the entire ocean, steady, unyielding, eternal. Poseidon stood before it, humbled, knowing the throne was not his to take, but to answer. The sea grew quiet, waiting for his choice, watching whether he would claim or listen. He bowed his head, not in defeat, but in reverence, acknowledging that the abyss chose. not he. And in that silence, the throne pulsed once more, brighter, welcoming him into its eternal covenant. The cavern glowed faintly as the throne pulsed with light, sending ripples across the still waters around it. Poseidon stood before it, the weight of silence pressing like an unseen hand upon his shoulders. The abyss was alive, not empty, listening to every thought he carried, measuring every beat of his heart. He knew this was no simple seat, but a covenant carved from the sea's will and eternity's memory. The throne shimmered, its coral spires shifting, its pearl surface glimmering like the moon's reflection in water. It pulsed again, resonating with the trident, which hummed softly, glowing brighter in his steady grasp. A voice came, not sound, but current, flowing into his mind like tides against a familiar shore. It asked no questions, but offered presence, vast, ancient, and deep as the sea itself. Poseidon closed his eyes, letting the current speak, its song carrying stories woven from salt and time. He saw visions of storms rising, of calm seas resting, of life thriving in balance below and above. The throne whispered of responsibility, not power, of harmony, not conquest, of listening, not command. It was not a prize for a victor, but a burden shared between God and sea alike. Poseidon bowed his head, and for the first time, he felt humbled before his own realm. The trident flared, a silver blaze, and the throne responded, casting soft waves of light around him. Symbols carved on. The cavern walls glowed faintly, spirals weaving together into patterns like tidal maps. The sea itself seemed to breathe, as though acknowledging the moment, ancient and sacred in its rhythm. Then came a shift, a stirring from the abyss, as the currents coiled and parted with grace. From the depths emerged forms, guardians of the throne, not beasts, but embodiments of the sea's will. Their shapes shimmered, some like manta rays of shadow, others like luminous serpents woven from light. They circled slowly, silent and vast, watching him, their presence neither threat nor welcome, but witness. Poseidon raised no defense, for he knew the sea tested not strength, but intention within the heart. He let his breath steady, his mind clear, and he offered himself as both ruler and servant. The guardians drifted closer, their eyes glowing with the reflection of ages beyond the memory of gods. One paused before him, a being like a whale carved from starlight, its gaze endless and calm. It lingered, then bowed its head, a motion that carried weight greater than mountains or storms. The others followed, bending in silent accord, their movement like a tide surrendering to the moon. Poseidon felt the trident grow lighter, its glow merging with the throne, no longer separate, but one. The cavern brightened, and for a moment, it was as if the abyss had turned into sky. Above him, he glimpsed not darkness, but constellations mirrored in the currents, stars of the sea itself. He realized then that the abyss was not an end, but a reflection of infinity in silence. The throne pulsed again, softer this time, as though inviting him to step forward and answer. Poseidon placed his hand on the throne's surface, feeling warmth unlike stone, alive as a heartbeat. The sea accepted him, the covenant sealed not by word, but by recognition of balance and trust. He heard the current whisper once more. The throne was not possession, but a vow without end. The guardians dissolved into the waters, their forms scattering into streams of light and shadow. The cavern grew still again, but now the silence was not heavy. It was harmonious and whole. Poseidon sat upon the throne, not as conqueror, but as listener, as keeper of what was eternal. The trident glowed gently in his hand, now a part of the throne's song. its pulse steady. In that moment, he knew he was not crowned by the abyss, but bound to it forever. The sea had spoken, the throne had chosen, and Poseidon became more than ruler, he became its voice. The throne settled into stillness, its glow fading to a steady rhythm like the heartbeat of the ocean itself. Poseidon sat, feeling the vastness of the sea run through him, no longer separate but one with its flow. The silence shifted, no longer heavy, but alive, carrying whispers of currents from every corner of the world. He closed his eyes, and visions rose, drawn not from his mind, but from the sea's endless memory. He saw distant shores where waves touched sand, where fishermen prayed, and sailors set forth with courage. He saw storms brewing, clouds gathering, winds rising, yet always followed by calm, balance restored. He saw creatures of every depth, from dolphins near the surface to hidden forms of the abyss. Each life was part of the same song, woven together, each note essential, none lesser or forgotten. The throne spoke again, not with words, but with rhythm, reminding him that he was keeper, not master. Poseidon breathed deeply, his chest rising with the tide, his soul echoing the call of eternity. The cavern around him dimmed, the glow softening, as if the sea itself had bowed in completion. But then, the current stirred again, subtle, carrying a different song, one woven with sorrow. He followed it with his heart, and visions shifted once more, showing imbalance across distant waters. He saw rivers choked with silt, shores eroded by neglect, reefs dimmed and corals fading pale. He saw sailors lost to storms, unprepared, their cries swallowed by winds that knew no mercy. He saw mortals forgetting their bond to the sea, taking without offering, draining without listening. Poseidon's brow furrowed, for the throne was not only gift, but burden, carrying every grief of water. The abyss whispered, not blame, but truth. Balance must be kept, and it was his vow to keep it. He opened his eyes, steady, resolved, and the trident pulsed gently, a reminder that he was not alone. The guardians of the abyss appeared once more, their forms gliding in circles, luminous and silent. They did not judge, but observe, carrying the weight of countless ages in their patient gaze. One approached, a serpent of light, its body coiling around him, not in restraint, but in embrace. It touched the throne, and the cavern trembled softly, a signal that the covenant now stretched beyond. Poseidon felt the current expand, carrying his presence outward, through tunnels, across ridges, into the open sea. He was still within the cavern, but his reach flowed far, carried by tides to every distant coast. He heard dolphins call in laughter, whales sing in mournful tones, turtles swim with ancient patience. The throne did not confine him, it connected him, making him voice and vessel of the sea. He understood now. This was the Abyssal Throne's true purpose, not power, but communion across all waters. The cavern walls brightened again, their spirals glowing, forming shapes of waves and moons intertwined. They told him that balance was never fixed, but living, requiring constant listening, patience, and humility. Poseidon bowed his head, not in weariness, but in solemn acceptance of the path set before him. The guardians bowed with him, their glowing forms fading back into the dark, leaving only ripples of light. Silence returned, but now it was full, layered with meaning, no longer absence, but presence complete. Poseidon rose from the throne, standing steady though, trident in his hand, humming with calm strength. He knew he could leave now, return to the surface. Yet he also knew he would never be the same. The abyss had changed him, not into a ruler, but into a bridge, eternal servant of harmony. He gazed once more at the throne, still glowing softly, waiting, watching, eternal, beyond any single keeper. It was not his forever, but for now, it had chosen him, and he would honor that bond. The current stirred gently, carrying him upward, as though the sea itself had opened the path ahead. Poseidon allowed himself to drift, guided by the abyss, ready to carry its voice back to the world. The throne faded behind him in the dim cavern light, but its song followed, steady, endless, eternal. The sea carried him upward, the currents weaving around his form like threads of light and memory. Poseidon let the water lift him, no struggle, only trust in the rhythm that had claimed his vow. He passed forests of kelp, their long arms swaying in the tide, whispering songs older than speech. Small fish darted between the fronds, scattering like sparks, their scales flashing silver in dim light. Each turn of the current carried more voices, as though the ocean itself welcomed his return. The abyss behind him dimmed, but its song lingered, steady, never fading, forever at his core. Above, the water brightened slowly, shifting from shadow to the pale shimmer of rising sunlight. Poseidon's trident hummed softly, guiding him as if pointing to the balance he must now keep. At last, he broke through the surface, waves parting, the sky vast, wide, and gleaming in blue. The wind greeted him with salt and spray, a reminder that the sea touched both air and land. He stood upon the waves, steady, his feet upon the water as if it were solid ground. The horizon stretched, endless, yet no longer empty, for he now carried the abyss within. In the distance, he saw islands, green and alive, where mortals built their lives upon the shore. He felt their prayers carried on the breeze, humble words offered with hope to the ocean's keeper. The sea had answered them for ages, though often in silence, and now he felt each call. He turned toward a fishing boat, small and fragile, rocking against the pull of restless waves. Its sails strained, its crew weary, their voices lifted in desperate pleas to unseen ears. Poseidon raised his hand, and the waters eased, calming into steady rhythm beneath their vessel. The sailors gasped, unaware of his presence, yet knowing somehow their prayers had been received. He smiled faintly, not with pride, but with quiet recognition of the covenant he must bear. The Abyssal Throne had shown him sorrow, imbalance, but also harmony waiting to be restored. It was not his alone to fix, but his to guide, to listen, to hold in balance. The trident pulsed again, and his thoughts spread outward, reaching distant shores and rivers. He felt mountains feeding streams, streams joining, rivers surrendering to the open sea. All were one body, one current, each part vital, each carrying life and memory together. Yet he also felt where the flow faltered, where men forgot the bond and took too much. He sighed, the weight of endless seas pressing upon his spirit, yet no despair took root. For the throne had taught him patience, and patience was deeper than storms, stronger than fury. Poseidon walked upon the water, each step rippling outward, carrying a quiet vow across waves. He knew the guardians of the abyss still watched, unseen, silent, their covenant unbroken. The sea did not belong to him, nor he to it, yet they were forever entwined. On the horizon, storm clouds gathered, their shadows casting restless patterns across the waves. He lifted the trident, and the storm bent its path, not destroyed, but guided to gentleness. Balance, always balance, never denial, for even storms had their place in the song of sea. The sun broke through again, golden upon the tide, and Poseidon closed his eyes in stillness. He remembered the throne, its glow, its silence, its truth, that power was not command, but care. He opened his eyes and saw seabirds wheel above him, their cries sharp, their flight free. The world was alive, from the smallest shell upon the sand to the whale's deep, haunting call. And he, Poseidon, was no ruler, but the listener, the bridge, the eternal guardian of harmony. The sea embraced him as both vast and intimate, endless and near, eternal and fleeting. With each wave that rose and fell, he knew the covenant was living, fragile and sacred. And so, with the abyss behind him and the horizon before, his journey had only begun. The horizon shimmered as Poseidon moved across the sea, his steps steady, guided by unseen tides. The sky above stretched wide and open, clouds drifting like thoughts, light spilling across the wave. He listened, not with ears but with spirit, to the ocean's whispers carried through every current. Each ripple was a voice, each swell a memory, each tide a message waiting to be heard. The trident in his hand glowed faintly, not with fire, but with the living pulse of the sea. Its hum echoed the abyss, reminding him that balance must guide every motion, every choice. Ahead, he saw a coastline where cliffs rose sharp and proud, carved by endless waves. Villages clung to the rocks, homes built against wind and spray, bound to the ocean's gift. He felt their lives woven with the tide, fishermen casting nets, children laughing upon the shore. Yet beneath that rhythm lay unrest, small but growing, a discord that troubled the water's song. Poseidon paused, closing his eyes, reaching deeper into the sea's memory for the truth beneath. The current carried visions, faint yet clear, of reefs crumbling and fish fleeing from broken homes. The people upon the cliffs had taken more than the sea could offer, forgetting the covenant. Not in malice, but in need. Yet, need without balance becomes wound, and wounds spread fast. He descended toward the shore, the waves parting softly, his form unseen by mortal eyes. Children chased foam at the edge of the surf, their laughter ringing bright, untouched by worry. Elders mended nets with weathered hands, their eyes heavy with knowledge of failing catches. The sea was generous, but it was not endless, and their hands had forgotten restraint. Poseidon sighed, not in anger, but in sorrow, for he saw both hunger and neglect entwined. He walked the shore, unseen, each step leaving no mark, yet the waves knew his presence. A gull wheeled above, crying sharply, its wings flashing white against the silver-blue sky. He looked out and saw a reef in the distance, once vibrant, now fading into gray silence. It was not dead, but weary, drained by years of demand without offering, of taking without pause. The throne had shown him such visions before, and now they lived before his very eyes. He reached out with his trident, touching the water gently, not to command, but to listen. The reef whispered of imbalance, of life fleeing, of corals dimming, yet also of hope. Hope, because balance could return, not with conquest, but with care, patience, and renewal. Poseidon lowered his head, listening, then lifted the trident high, its glow reaching the deep. The sea stirred, currents weaving around the reef, carrying seeds of renewal through the tide. Fish darted back, curious and quick, as though remembering an ancient home once forgotten. Corals shimmered faintly, not healed in a breath, but stirred awake, ready to begin again. The mortals on the cliffs did not see him, but they felt the sea shift beneath their boats. Their nets would not overflow, not yet, for true balance was not abundance without care. Instead, the ocean whispered gently to them, urging patience, urging remembrance of their bond. Poseidon smiled softly, his heart steady, for the throne had given him not power, but trust. He turned away from the reef, the trident's glow dimming, leaving the sea to heal in time. Behind him, the cliffs stood firm, the villages small yet strong, bound forever to the tide. He walked back across the waves, listening again, each step carrying him farther from the shore. The sea spoke once more, carrying new voices, distant storms, wandering whales, rivers seeking the ocean. He followed, not with haste, but with certainty, for every voice deserved its place in the song. Above, the sun began to set, painting the waters with fire and gold, endless, eternal. And Poseidon walked on, a silent keeper, the abyss within him, the horizon calling him forward. Night spread across the waters, deep and vast, the stars above, mirroring the countless lights below. Poseidon moved across the waves in silence, his steps steady, the trident glowing faintly in his hand. The ocean breathed beneath him, dark yet alive, carrying voices from the farthest corners of its reach. He listened, as he always did, to the chorus of currents, each whisper carrying weight and memory. The throne had bound him to this endless song, not as ruler, but as guardian of its harmony. Tonight, the song carried a new note, low and mournful, woven with sorrow and quiet urgency. He followed the call, letting the tide guide him, each ripple drawing him closer to its source. The air grew heavy, the scent of brine sharp, the horizon lined with clouds that swallowed starlight. He felt the shift before he saw it, the water trembling, not with storm, but with grief unspoken. A great pod of whales moved beneath the surface, their voices rising in long, aching lament. Their songs stretched across the night, echoing sorrow that resonated through every wave and stone. Poseidon closed his eyes, listening, feeling their grief vibrate within his own chest, deep and solemn. The whales circled, restless, their great bodies breaking the surface with sprays of silver breath. He saw in their voices a story of migration interrupted, of seas made shallow, of paths broken. Currents once familiar now twisted, blocked, their ancient roots tangled by shifting tides and shores. They sought the way home, the way of their ancestors, but the water no longer guided them true. Poseidon stepped forward, raising the trident high, its glow spilling into the depths below. The sea responded, currents awakening, lines of force weaving like threads of silver in the dark. He traced the paths, listening deeper, until he saw the truth carried by the whale's lament. A great channel, long and deep, had been altered, its rhythm broken, its flow turned astray. Not by malice, but by change, by time, by shifts in earth and stone beneath the sea. Yet the whales, ancient and faithful, still sought the path that no longer existed in full. Their grief was not only loss, but confusion, memory colliding with present, heart clashing with tide. Poseidon lowered the trident, his hand brushing the water, a gesture of promise and care. He whispered to the whales, not in words, but in silence carried by the current of thought. He showed them new paths, woven through shifting seas, ways to return though the old was gone. The whales lifted their voices once more, the lament softening into tones of acceptance and trust. They swam together, their great forms gliding with strength, following the currents he had renewed. Poseidon watched them fade into the night, their songs now a hymn of hope, not sorrow. He felt the ocean settle, balance restored, not by command, but by listening, patience, and guidance. The stars above shimmered brighter, reflected in the calm, as though the heavens themselves approved. He stood upon the still water, breathing deeply, the trident pulsing with quiet strength at his side. Each act was small, yet each one mattered. For harmony was built not in storms, but in moments. He turned again to the horizon, the endless expanse stretching before him, calling him onward. The throne had shown him truth. He was bound not to rule, but to serve without end. And so he walked on, the night vast around him, the sea eternal, the song never ceasing. Dawn broke slowly, spilling pale light across the horizon, the sea shifting from shadow to silver. Poseidon stood upon the waves, the trident glowing faintly, its hum steady as the ocean's breath. The journey had carried him from the abyss to the shore, from silence to song, from sorrow to harmony. He closed his eyes, listening once more, letting the ocean speak through every ripple and tide. The throne's memory pulsed within him, not heavy but present, a reminder of the covenant he wore. Balance was never final, never fixed, always moving like currents, always living like waves. His vow was not to rule, not to conquer, but to walk beside the sea, forever listening. The guardians of the abyss stirred faintly, their presence unseen but felt, watching with patient silence. They knew, as he did, that the throne was eternal, waiting beyond time, beyond a single keeper. Poseidon breathed deeply, the salt air sharp yet sweet, the sky above vast and unbroken. He thought of mortals on the shore, their lives bound to the tide, fragile yet resilient. He thought of whales finding new paths, of reefs stirring awake, of storms softened into calm. Every act mattered, no matter how small, for each was a note in the endless song of sea. The horizon blazed with sunlight, golden upon the waves, as though the heavens themselves gave blessing. Poseidon lifted the trident once more, not in command, but in reverence, offering his vow to the deep. The ocean answered, not with thunder, but with stillness, the quiet harmony of balance restored. He lowered his hand, smiling faintly, for he knew the work was endless and yet never in vain. The sea was eternal, and so too was his bond, woven into the rhythm of tide and storm. He turned, walking across the waves, his form fading into distance, yet his presence everywhere at once. Every shore he touched, every current he felt, every prayer whispered was part of the same song. The abyssal throne waited in silence, far below, watching with patience, eternal and unbroken. It would call again, when the sea required, when balance shifted, when listening was once more needed. But for now, Poseidon carried its voice, not as king, but as keeper, guardian, servant of harmony. The sun rose higher, painting the sea in light, the waves alive with color and motion. Seabirds wheeled overhead, their cries sharp, their wings flashing white against the endless sky. Fish leapt from the water, scattering silver sparks, life alive, restless and full of song. He listened, smiling, for the ocean's voice was no longer burden, but blessing, no longer weight, but gift. The horizon stretched wide, endless, carrying both mystery and promise, eternal as the sea itself. Poseidon walked on, silent and steady, his steps rippling outward, each wave carrying his vow forward. And though his form faded, the song remained, woven into the sea, steady, endless, eternal. This was his truth, his path, his vow, never to rule but always to listen, always to keep. For the sea was not his kingdom, but his soul, not his power, but his eternal companion. And so, as dawn gave way to day, the story of Poseidon and the Abyssal Throne lived on.